All right, what's up, everybody? It's Terminator Juice. Happy Saturday to you. This Juice Opinion's got to be under an hour because Rocket League, the uh, the spring major, the last spring major, starting in about 45 minutes or so. So try to wrap this up. So yeah, wait. It usually takes a bit for people to jump in. I was trying to just figure out a way to what I want to do is do like a tier list for like the free, the free next gen upgrades, and kind of have them in a tier list. But I just really couldn't think of a good way to do that. So I have a list written down, and it's gonna suck for people that jump in later. But what I want to discuss, I want to go over um, the FPS boost mode. What's up, is human? I want to discuss that because there's a lot of variations to the games, and it's not what I was hoping it was going to be. There's some games that are. There's actually like three tiers, I would say, of the FPS boost mode, as far as like the enhancements and stuff. And then I just thinking about that, I was like, in The Last of Us 2, 60 frames per second update came out last week, and I thought, you know what, let's break this down. Let's make a list of the upgrades you'll experience if you buy a Series X or a PS5. And I want to. This is going to be based on somebody upgrading from the base Xbox One, 1S, and the base PS4. Because if you add in, like, if you already had the Pro or the 1X, then it gets really muddy. It gets really hard to put these in any kind of order that makes sense. So I'm just going to go from the base consoles to PS5 and the Xbox One or Series X, not the S. And then what gives you the most upgrade, in my opinion. You might feel differently. So that's kind of the gist of what I'm going to do. And like I said, I don't know. I couldn't think of a good way to do that visually. So you're gonna have to bear with me and just pay attention. I'm gonna go through what I think. There's six main tiers, and then there's some subsets into each couple of the tiers, which I'll break down. I'll try to give examples of some games, and then maybe a discussion afterwards. So just like I said in the beginning, FPS boost mode. The 100 games have been added now, and it's definitely a cool thing. I'm happy Microsoft's pushing for this. I just wish there was more consistency within that mode of what the enhancements are for the games. And all of them are getting double the frame rate. That's the whole point. But the problem is that doesn't always that there's instances where you're actually downgrading the visuals and resolution over like the 1X version of the game. So it's weird that it's so inconsistent. So but anyway, like I said, I want to keep this shorter. I'm going to go through the tier list, and then and if people jump in, I'll just probably keep reiterating, hey, go back and rewatch from the beginning, because I don't have any kind of visual on screen. I'm not that professional. So yeah, at the bottom, obviously, is the pay. You have to pay to get the upgrade games. I'm not including them in the tier because this is the free upgrades tier list. But I think there's 3 games out right now that you have to pay to get an upgrade, and that is Spider-Man Remastered, which you have to pay $70 for. Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, which I believe is $40. So that one's at least discounted. And then Control, the Ultimate Edition. Technically, if you had bought the Ultimate Edition, was the first time you bought the game, then yeah, the upgrade's free. But if you're like me and just bought Control, the original version, the upgrade is locked behind the Ultimate Edition, which is $40. So at least those two are 40. Whereas Spider-Man Remastered, yeah, you get Miles Morales, but if you just really want to play Spider-Man Remastered, you have to pay $70. There's just no way around it. And Miles Morales isn't a long enough game to justify that 70, in my opinion. So those are off the list. Those are the worst case scenario examples. So the actual low tier, the sixth tier, number 6 on my tier list. So you bought a PS5 and you bought a Series X, and you put your games in via backwards compatibility. The base, or the number 6 on a tier, is the games that were already running at locked frame rate. So the bottom would be the games that were locked at 30. All you're getting is a loading time improvement. Same with the games that were already locked at 60. And when I say locked, I mean within a few frames. If it drops to 28, 29, but it's mostly at 30, that's locked. If it's 60, but it drops to like 50, maybe 55 and up, randomly at very sporadic times, that's pretty much locked 60. So you're not really getting an upgrade. So that's the bottom of the barrel. You're getting faster loading times. That's all you're getting. And they're not even as fast as they would be if they were like built for the PlayStation or an Xbox, the new current gen. So the tier 5, which actually is a pretty nice jump, are the games that weren't enhanced. I forgot to say that for number 6. These weren't enhanced for the Pro or the One X. So there's no enhancements. They're some of the earlier generational games that never received a patch to upgrade to PS4 Pro and then later on One X. So you're getting the base version of the games, but they ran at suboptimal frame rate. So tier 5B would be games that were sub 30. They couldn't hit their 30 frames per second consistently. And then tier A would be the games that were going for 60 but couldn't hit 60. Maybe it ran in the low 40s, mid 40s. Now you're getting just locked. So 5B would be locked 30, 5A you're getting locked 60, no question, no ifs, ands, or buts. And also if they had a dynamic resolution scaling, that's going to run at the max resolution the whole time. So for tier 5 and 6, PS5 will actually has the advantage here because a lot of base Xbox One games were 900p, some were 720p, and very, very few were 1080, whereas I think 99% of PS5 games were already 1080. So at least, it looks a little bit better. 1080 looks better than 720 or 900p on your 4K TV. And I forgot to add, I really wanted to say this in the beginning. So yeah, you're going from your base systems to the new gen, but also you have 120 hertz 4K monitor or 120 hertz 4K television. That's, if you don't have that, some of the stuff goes out the window. So this is like a true next gen experience. You need at least 120 hertz monitor that does 4K and or a TV that's 120 hertz at 4K. So here I feel these two 5 and 6 tiers, the PS5 owners will have the advantage because your games are 1080p. So next we're going to tier 4, and 4B is your Pro and Xbox One X enhanced games that were targeting 30 frames per second. Whether they hit it or not, now you're getting your PS4 Pro or your One X visuals and resolution at a lock 30. So that's 4B. 4A obviously is the 60 frames per second, same scenario. You're getting the visual enhancements. Now you're at a lock 60, no questions about it. But they were already, these games were already targeting 60. And Xbox has the advantage here because the One X games ran consistently higher, higher than PS4 Pro was usually 1440, and One X games were 1800p, some were 2160p. So you're getting a nice upgrade going from base consoles. Now, if you, like I said, if you already had a One X, all you're getting is the resolution will hit its target, frame rate will hit its target. So more of an upgrade for people with base consoles. So tier 3 and 3B is, and this is there's not that many games in here, but I still feel like it's a bigger upgrade, is the PS4 Pro and One X enhanced games that ran at an uncapped frame rate, but were really only hitting like 30 frames per second. An example of this was The Last Guardian on PS4, was uncapped. What was the? There was another one that actually got patched later, and I think it was a third party game. Damn, what was it? Oh, God of War. Initially, this God of War was part of this category, but they later added a patch where the game ran. If you put the disc in and didn't update it, the game was unlocked, but it ran at 30. So you would instantly get 60 frames per second at your PS4 Pro and One X. Assassin's Creed Unity was this, but that later got a FPS boost mode. Last Guardian's still the only one now, I think, substantial game where you put in your PS5, you don't do the update, and you get the Pro resolution and stuff, but you get 60 frames per second. But you do lose some of the bug fixes and stuff, so it's a trade-off. So 3A, again, this is my opinion, is the FPS boost Xbox One enhanced games, but they were enhanced in a it wasn't the resolution. So let's say an Xbox One enhanced game, instead of being 900 or 720p on the One S, the One X version was 1080. A good example of this is Yakuza 6 ran at 1080 and now it runs at 60 frames per second. There are games though that run up to 120 frames per second. So Metro Redux runs at 120 first person shooter. Guess it feels really good, but it is 900p, and it's like, is that, that's kind of it's better obviously if you have a 120 hertz display. That's a nice upgrade, but if you don't, you're not getting an upgrade. And in some instances, the FPS boost games, you have a one. Let's say the game has a 1x enhancement, 1800p or whatever. I think Titanfall 2 or something is a good example of this. If you go into FPS boost mode, it drops it all the way down to 1S resolution. So instead of 1800p, you got 1800p 60 for Titanfall 2, which looks really good, but your FPS boost mode is 900p at 120. When all facts tell you that it should be able to do the 1800p at 120. So it's kind of a weird, like I said, the FPS boost is inconsistent. It's all over the place. One of the bright sides though are games that were like 1080p, like a side-scrolling indie game like Hollow Knight. Now you have 120 frames per second mode, which for a 2D platformer, that really does feel great. I can tell you from Ori, playing Ori and the Will of the Wisps, the 120 makes a huge difference for a side-scrolling precision platformer. So that's good, and I just wish that there wasn't so many games in this category where they doubled the frame rate, but the resolution runs at the 1S version. I think that's almost not worth it at that point. So the second tier 2, I have a B and an A version. 2B is the PS4 Pro game, Sony exclusive games that got a 60 FPS patch. So they run at 1440p, and now instead of 30, they run at 60. Now Sony's only done 5 games at this point: God of War, Ratchet and Clank, Days Gone, Ghost of Tsushima, and then now they just did The Last of Us 2. But to me, this is a better upgrade than playing 900p 720p games at 120. Even though I have 120 frames per second capable TV, I feel this is this is a bigger upgrade, especially for most people. Most people aren't going to have 120 frames per second TV. So that's where I put the Sony's exclusives. Tier A is the FPS boost Xbox One enhanced games that run at the high resolution and get the frame rate doubling. So Shadow of the Tomb Raider has been, I think, the best one so far. it runs at nearly 4K and a lock 60, and it looks amazing. Like, it looks great. So if that game can do 4K at 60, I don't know why some of these other games have to go down to 720 or 900p. So this is close. Like, this is almost, I almost put this as 1B because that's a nice enhancement. I wish, and honestly, even the PS4 games, the 5 game Sony has patched, 60 frames per second patch, it's right there too with the 1X enhanced. The reason I put the FPS boost games ahead is because there's the potential for one of these games to run at the 1X visual settings and resolution and hit 120, which, like I said, I'll go into a little bit more at the end. I'll kind of discuss FPS boost in general at the end. But I think there's the potential for this to be as good as, the number one tier, which is games that actually got enhanced for the next generation patches, or you download a separate version, like on PS5. I had Immortals PS4. Said, well, do you want to download the PS5 version? Yes, I do. And I download that, and then I just click that, and every time I boot it up, I play that version. So that's a lot of the cross-gen games. Ubisoft was there with Immortals, Assassin's Creed, Valhalla, and Watch Dogs Legion. Microsoft did Gears 5, a nice upgrade, Ori and the Will of the Wisps. So they increased the visual settings, they increased the resolution, and added either a 60 frames per second option or 120 frames per second option. Plus you get, takes more advantage of the hardware, so you get even faster loading times, like Resident Evil Village. Like, that's cross-gen. I'm not sure what happens if you buy the PS4 version, if you get the PS5. I think you do, but the loading times are just quick, because they're taking more advantage of the hardware. So that's the top tier. Free next-gen enhancements where you actually download a different version of, different file, a different, they rebuilt this game for the PlayStation 5. Now on Xbox, it's seamless. There's no second version. It's just the smart delivery system. But they still have to basically make a Series X version of Gears 5. And then it just automatically downloads and plays that version. Whereas PS4, you have the R5, you have the option to play the PS4 version still if you wanted to. Don't know why you would, but you can. So you might say, well, that's, PS5 doesn't have one of those, but that's not true, because believe it or not, of all the damn companies, Square Enix is providing PS5 owners with the equivalent to the Gears 5 upgrade, and that's the Final Fantasy Remake Interlude. You don't have to buy the Interlude. If you purchase Final Fantasy 7 Remake digitally or physically on PS4, you get all the PS5 version upgrades minus the Yuffie or whatever deal. That's a separate DLC you'd have to buy. But you get increased textures, which I can tell you from playing the remake, it needed. Texture quality is really low in a lot of areas in that game. They added ray trace reflections. They added improved lighting. They add a photo mode, and 60 frames per second. And that's a free upgrade if you have if you bought the game. It doesn't count if you just downloaded it off PlayStation Plus. But honestly, I'm looking at picking up the game for $40, the physical version, to get the enhancements. So to me, that's the top tier as far as enhance and upgrades for 8th gen games playing on your 9th gen system. So I wish there was more in the number one category as far as like free, like bigger upgrades, especially the Sony first party games. I would love for some more improvements, some increase some of the texture quality and increase the loading times even more. But it's just not in the cards. I don't think Sony's going to do that, whereas Microsoft has done it. And I think technically Forza Horizon 4 got a next-gen enhancement, but really, if you watch Digital Foundry's video, they just basically it plays in the 1X visuals at 60 frames per second. It was pretty minor. It's more of a FPS boost type game. I put that in the 2A tier. It's closer to the 2 tier. What the FPS boost games and what Sony did with their first party games. That's basically what Forza Horizon 4 is. It didn't get like a full on visual makeover. So yeah, so it runs the gamut of upgrades depending on what game it is. Like Bloodborne on PS4, that would be tier 5B because it never got a PS4 Pro update visually, and it ran at sub 30 at times. So you're getting the 1080p of PS4, you're just getting a locked 30. So it's really a minor upgrade. There is a hack somebody did where you can run it at 60 on PS5, but it takes a lot of BS that most people aren't going to do. Let me think. I mentioned that the Xbox has the advantage in any of the 1X enhanced games that are getting boosted via the Series X. PS4, PS5 owners have the advantage with the tiers 6 and 5 where you're running the base resolution with improved frame rates, and then it's kind of a toss-up once you get above that, and it's like I don't know what the inconsistency, what the reason is. I'm not that knowledgeable about the tech. I don't know why there's PS4 or Xbox One games that have 1X enhancements, why it drops down to the 1S resolution and visual settings to double the frame rate when Shadow of the Tomb Raider proves you can still keep the higher res and double the frame rate. So I don't know what it takes. If there's just some kind of, because they're forcing they're going in, they're not going in and recoding the games from what I understand. It's a system level boost of the frame rate. So there must be some kind of compatibility issue with some of the 1X enhanced games where it just isn't, either it's not working or it's not hitting the frame rate consistent enough. So the discussion becomes, and Clocked brought this up for a couple reasons. Is it better as far as promotion wise to focus on bigger games, lesser games, and getting them so they get their attention one at a time or two at a time versus just doing a dump of like 20 games? When I hate to say this honestly, because I'm going to be a Series X owner, and I was actually thinking of like buying some older games to get the enhancements, finding out that I feel like it's more than half. I don't have the actual number of the 100, but as far as Digital Foundry's video, it's way more than half actually run at the 1S resolution in order to get the frame rate doubling to 60 or 120. And to me, that took all the wind out of the sails of FPS boost mode. Like, I almost feel like it's better than nothing, obviously. But, I mean, I can tell you, playing 1S on my 4K TV, it's not the prettiest thing. I mean, it's better than, a Switch game running on Switch, like a third-party game. But some of these bigger open games, 3D games running at 720 or 900p, it's just not worth, to me. I would rather play Titanfall 2 at 1800p 60 frames per second than 900p, or I think it's 900p 120. Like, yeah, it's smooth and it feels good, but man, that's a huge drop in visual quality. I don't know why that they couldn't get that game. It's a lot of EA games too. So to me, that, like, the Xbox diehards are going to be hyping up FPS boost. I'm sure they are. I don't follow any. I'm sure they're hyping up the 100 games, and Sony's done five of their own games, and then some third parties have done some of the cross-gen games. But I told the guys, and I was exaggerating, I said I'd rather have one, like, Shadow of the Tomb Raider example, or one Last of Us 2 example, versus 100 Titanfall 2s where it's 900p to double the frame rate. Like, you could say it's resolution horn, but it's only because I know the hardware can do it. That's why it bothers me. It's only because, and I say Shadow of the Tomb Raider over and over because those are the one. That's the one game for sure I know, but I know there are others that run at the higher resolution and you get double the frame rate. So that's the standard set by the FPS boost mode itself. So I'm judging it against itself. So here you have the high res version, 1X version, that gets the double the frame rate. Then down in the middle, you have the 1X enhanced version. Well, I'd say that gets a, actually every FPS boost is doubled. So there isn't any where you just get a better, you go from like running at 45 to hitting 60. So I don't think there's actually any FPS boost enhanced games. But the low end is 720p 60, 720p at 120. Like, to me, that's like I've always said about Switch ports. At that point, I don't even think it's worth. Yeah, you did it and it's there, the option's there. But to me, I'm not gonna play. I would rather play the game at a way higher, like especially if it has 1X enhancements. Now the games that didn't get 1X enhanced at all, fine. This is definitely the best way to play these games. There's no question about it. There's no way to tap into something because that requires work being done on the game itself, whereas FPS boost is a hardware level. I like what they're trying, and I like the ones that do it, that are really doing it well. It's great. Like, that's an awesome feature. I would really be curious, though, out of that 100, how many actually run at the high 1X resolution and have, the 60 frames per second. I don't think there's any 120 frame ones, because I'm curious how many that actually is. Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 20? I don't know. I don't know if there's even a list to figure it out. I didn't watch all Digital Foundry's videos, so I don't know. I watched a couple, and then literally I was skipping through, and the last one they did, just about it. I don't know if there's 8 games or so. How many games was it? I should look. I don't know. However many games there were, it seems like almost every one ran at the 1S resolution. And it's like, it's, better than nothing, but at the same time, it's, to me, what's up, Capable Ty? It's not really, the feature is, it's not that valuable at that point, to me. And if you don't have 120 frames per second monitor or TV, then at best you're getting a 60 frames per second version of an Xbox One S game. At best, that's best case scenario. Xbox adds the auto HDR, but that's another feature where it's hit or miss. Some games it works, other games it doesn't look any different, and some games it makes the game look worse. So it's just one of those things where I feel like it's going to be a big talking point, but the actual execution is nowhere near that. The 100 games, it's nowhere near that 100 are actually what people would consider, a worthy next gen upgrade. That's just how I feel about it. Yeah, I wish Sony did I wish they did more than just double the frame rate of the 5 games they've done. But that, to me, that's a surefire. You know what you're getting. You're going from 30 with really good visuals to 60. With Days Gone, there's still a few instances where it drops to like the mid 50s during the horde mode and stuff. But it's not just that game in particular had issues with streaming, because I found out the game was 60 gigs at launch. They shrunk it down to 38 gigs trying to streamline because of the memory bandwidth or something, a CPU of the PS4. The game had a lot of stuttering, had a lot of pauses. Like, it would pause for half a second as it's trying to do all these calculations with animations and physics and stuff. All that stuff's gone. So it actually, you're getting almost like 60. You're getting the PS4 Pro resolution of 1440p, upscaled rather convincingly to 4K, but you're also getting a smoother experience. I'm sure it's the same with the 1X FPS boost games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider. It's just cleaner overall. Yeah, I didn't even. I'm glad you brought that up. All the while, let's see, where do I draw the line? Where, because Nintendo, they're just giving us ports, and the upgrades are smaller than the majority of these free upgrades. So let's see. I would say the Switch ports from Wii U, even some of the 360 PS3 ports, I feel are lesser than probably the top three tiers that I've had here. You know, playing a like the Last Guardian, you know, on PS4 Pro, it's 1440p and it struggled to hit 30, 20 to 30, you know, mid 20s, low 20s, and now you're getting at 60 at that resolution. There's not a Switch port from Wii U that changes the frame rate other than Bayonetta 2 takes it from like the low 40s, mid 40s to 60, but it plays at the same resolution. So I would say a majority of these free upgrades are better than the Switch ports. Obviously, there's no backwards compatibility. There could be. They could just make a digital Wii U eShop. Um, I'm sure the game, I don't know how it would work, if they could emulate it, whatever. But Nintendo's next system doesn't have these type of upgrades. That's going to be a huge fail. That's like if basically you play put a Switch game in the Switch 2 and it's tier 6 or let's say tier 5 where it just takes the game as it was and just it runs at the target frame rate. So if Breath of the Wild put it in and it's still 900p but now it's locked 30. If that's all you get with the Switch 2 or the next Switch, yeah, at least it's backwards compatibility, but that's going to be disappointing. Imagine if there was just amazing new games to talk about. There is a bunch of games to talk about, but I see a FPS boost getting some attention, rightly so. I like the idea. I just wish it was executed better. And but I mean, what am I going to talk about? Ratchet and Clank looks good. I can't. Really looking forward to playing Returnal in probably in a few weeks here. I'm going to pick it up. RE Village, I'll probably have that beat tonight, maybe tomorrow. Kana looks good. What else? We don't know about a ton of stuff. Mario Golf actually looks pretty damn good. Probably going to pick that up. I have some doubts, but I'm looking forward to playing that. And then I'm drawing a blank. I know there's at least one other one I was looking forward to. I guess if Horizon is a 2021 game, but yeah, I mean there's a ton. We got E3 coming up. I really hope that a lot of these companies have just been waiting, knowing that they were going to do some kind of E3. That would be great if that's the reason we haven't found out much about the rest of this year. So yeah, what do you guys think? Anybody here got an Xbox Series X? I left out the S because some of the games aren't supported in the FPS boost mode. I'm happy for the future, and I hope it's going to keep expanding. I hope that is we get more of the better, you know, the One X games getting double the frame rate and less of the One S version getting the double the frame rate, because I don't, you know, I'm a bit of a graphics whore. Everybody makes fun of me and stuff, but my One S playing like Forza Horizon 4, it runs at 1080 resolution, but the visual settings are fairly low and 30 frames per second. So if all that got was now it runs at 60, you know, it didn't. It got a more substantial upgrade. But if FPS Boost just took that game to 60 at those lower visual settings at 1080, I'd be disappointed in that. Especially since the One X exists and it has a 4K-ish, 1800p or whatever, 30. And that's what Sony did. They took their Pro Enhanced games and they doubled the frame rate. And, you know, some other improvements, loading times, and, you know, asset streaming and all that gets improved. That, to me, should be the baseline. That should be the minimum that we get. And I wish that was the case. But sadly, it isn't. You know, You don't see yourself getting a Series X till Ori 3, maybe Starfield, Elder Scrolls, not until 2022 or later. Honestly, if this E3 looks amazing and there's a lot of great looking 2022 games, I wouldn't have a problem picking up the Series X at some point later. You don't need high res to enjoy a game. Nobody needs that. But I'm saying if you're gonna hype up a feature, but if power's there, damn right, I go for the better. Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying that that's what's needed, but if you're gonna give a feature, and we know the power of the system, and we know a game can do almost 4K at 60, like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, when it was 30 frames per second on the One X. Like, I want to see more games in that category, and way less games in the One S getting a double the frame rate. Like I said, I think what the PS4 exclusives have got should be at bare minimum, and it should be better. I think Sony should be doing more. I think God of War looks great, and what was it, God of War or Ghost of Tsushima? One of them, Digital Foundry, broke down really well. They said there's another whole discussion we need to have on this new upscaling techniques, these new rendering. It's not really just upscaling, but it's almost imperceivable to tell the difference between 4K native and an upscaled like 1440p. So this whole discussion about resolutions is going to become like the old bits when you talk about systems, 32-bit, 64-bit. Once it got to the Dreamcast, you couldn't just call it 128-bit. It was no longer relevant to discussing the power of a system. And the same's going to happen when talking about native resolution of games. And this is kind of a spin-off topic, but a lot of people made a big deal. I say a lot, but you heard people chirping when it turned out that Returnal, which was saying 4K 60, actually is an internal... the game renders at an internal resolution of 1080p, and then it uses Unreal Engine 4's, I don't want to say upscaling, I feel it's a different word, their technique for running the game or outputting at, I think it's 1440. So the game's internally rendering at 1080. Unreal Engine 4 is boosting that to 1440p. And then your PS5 or your TV, I think the PS5's upscaling that to 4K, and that's what your TV thinks it's getting, a 4K 60. Now, Unreal Engine 4 has one of the worst techniques, or whatever you want to call it, for doing that rendering. But I think it's I'm pretty sure it was like God of War. God of War on PS4 Pro and now PS5. Technically, the game's only being rendered at 1440p, and then they're using their upsampling or whatever technique to get it to 1800 or 4K, whatever it is. And it's almost unnoticeable other than a few little things. What's up, Donnie? I think Ratchet and Clank was the one best example they gave, where that also internally, and I keep having to reiterate, the game engine's actually rendering the game at 1440p, but then they're using their upsampling technique at Insomniac with their game engine, and you literally can't tell the difference between 4K and native 4K and that upsampled 1440p. So at that point, the native resolution becomes, or the native rendering resolution becomes unimportant, obsolete, and we need to stop. It will at some point soon. It'll just not be part of the discussion. Like I said, just like the bits were with home consoles, it's just going to become irrelevant. It doesn't matter what the internal rendering resolution is with these new upsampling techniques. DLSS 2.0, that's NVIDIA's proprietary, that you can't, Xbox and PlayStation can't use that because they're AMD. But if AMD can match that, then literally that would open the door for games that look as good as God of War, games that look as good as Gears 5. They could render that, the game engine could render that at 1080, and it could upsample it to 4K or 1800p, and you're going to get that extra horsepower put into either 120 frames per second or a lock 60 or improved draw distance, or just a better looking game with more impressive lighting, more impressive visual effects, more particle effects, and we're going to be better off for it, even though technically it's rendering the game at base PS4 resolution, because a lot of base PS4 games render at 1080. But if those base PS4 games could have rendered at 720, we would have got them, and then had that upsampling, the level of visuals would have been, I mean, we'd be like Rift Apart. Like the Ratchet and Clank reboot could have been almost Rift Apart level visuals if it could have rendered that at 720 and had it upsampled to 1080, or maybe ran it at 540p. So this is gonna really, it's the biggest game changer, I think. I don't know what the last big one was, but this is gonna be the biggest game changer to visuals. The Switch 2 could benefit the most. We could see, Nintendo games, or Nintendo go from Switch to near PS5 level visuals if they can use DLSS 2.0 or whatever, maybe 3.0 will be out by the time the Switch 2 comes out. And Breath of the Wild could render at the exact same 900p, but be upsampled to 4K and look amazing, and then also increase a bunch of other visual settings. I mean, it would just be, I hope this is the case, and I really hope people stop worrying about the actual internal resolution. I brought it up a lot in my tier list for the next gen upgrades, because there is no upsampling on these base Xbox One S games running at 720p. There's no magic thing making that look great on a 4K TV. There just isn't. So that's why it's so disappointing to me that the FPS boost games, a lot of them run at the 1S resolution, because it doesn't have any kind of upsampling that's effective. So I'm just really looking forward to where we're going with the Unreal Engine 5. That demo they put out, they talked a lot, and maybe some of that stuff isn't going to actually pan out or make as much difference as they said. But like the Coalition, who makes the Gears games, they said they're fully on Unreal Engine 5 now. They're done with 4, and the visual increases we're going to see in the next couple years, I think, is going to be mind-blowing. And again, because it doesn't have to render at native 4K to look like 4K and look amazing, so that's going to free up power for, I think we're going to have 60 frames per second. I don't expect really any 30 frames per second games. Maybe that's naive. Maybe once Santa Monica or Naughty Dog or something makes a true PS5 from the ground up game, and they're going to, well, let's target 30. Let's push it as far as it can go. But I honestly, no one will be able to, I won't remember saying it in this video. I'll forget which video it was. I'm going to say right now, I don't expect a 30 frames per second first party game from either Microsoft or Sony moving forward for this generation. I really don't. I know the Medium was a 30 frames per second and not even a lock 30 for the Series X and PC, but I just really think moving forward, I think the frame rates are going to be consistently 60 and above, and I think that's all better. 4K is nice if you have a 65, 77-inch TV 2 meters in front of you. And a monitor. Yeah, you're sitting close to a monitor, but a monitor going from 1080 to 1440p, huge difference. TVs, yeah, if you're sitting 10 feet away from a 50-inch, you're not going to notice the difference. Well, yeah, I'm talking about Lucius DLSS. Yeah, the game has to be engineered with DLSS in mind, but I'm talking about the Switch 2. Like, they could make that part of the hardware, so when you're developing a game, it's just there. It's just a tool to use. You don't have, a lot of this they have to go back because DLSS came late, so they have to go back and rework the games. But now that it's there, they can build their games around DLSS and these upsampling techniques as they're making the game. So that's a little bit different. But getting back to the TV thing, yeah, if you have, let's say you're sitting 10 feet away and you have a 50-inch TV. First of all, you have too small of a TV for your distance. You're supposed, like, optimal viewing distance for a TV is about twice as far away from the TV as it is wide, or the diagonal. So if you had a 50-inch TV, ideally you'd be sitting 100 inches away, which is like 9 feet. But I think with 4K, actually that changed. It's like 1.5. What's up, ASAP? About to get out of here. Go watch some Rocket League. But yeah, ideally, it's really not about the resolution or the resolution of your TV. But even if you're sitting further away, having a 4K like 42-inch compared to a 1080 42-inch for gaming is going to be a bigger difference than like movies and stuff. For movies, you really need huge TVs. Like even my 92-inch screen in my theater room, I'm not going to notice the what 4K does as much as somebody that has a 150-inch screen, because what 4K, anybody that's a photographer will know this, you know, the higher megapixels and stuff, it doesn't, on my phone, like size screen, I take a shot, it looks amazing on my phone screen. And old digital cameras back in the day had the little screens, looked amazing. Even blow it up to your computer monitor and you're like, oh, that doesn't look great. But if you took a really high-end camera that took huge megapixel pictures and you viewed that versus the low quality on your phone, you wouldn't see as much difference. Now you blow that up to a print, like a poster, and that's where you see the difference. It's the same thing with 4K movies, more so than gaming, is it holds up better the larger you make it. So ideally, if you're going to buy a 4K TV, unless you're sitting really close to it, bigger, you want to go bigger than what you did with your 1080, because the higher resolution actually makes stuff look smaller, and it allows you to sit closer without it messing up your eyes because of the higher resolution. So what I really want, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, for my theater room, I have a 92-inch 16:9. What I want to do is put in-wall speakers behind the screen and get an acoustically transparent screen, and then get like a 120-inch 16:9 screen, or maybe even bigger. And I'll probably have to move my projector back, get a different projector. And then when I watch like a 4K, like Ghost in the Shell, the live action, that's shot in 16:9. So it's going to be huge, like massive. But when I watch a movie like that's in CinemaScope, which is 2.40 to 1, the wide where you get the black bars, I want to actually make a masking system of like black velvet or light absorbing fabric that's black that I can that will slide into place, and so that the black bars won't be there, and it actually helps with the contrast and stuff. And you zoom it in, so you get this really wide image that looks great. And then when you watch something like on Netflix that's in 16:9, then you have this massive screen. Like that's what I want. PPI versus sharp your eyes are. The closer you are to a screen, the more resolution will matter. Yeah, absolutely. But closer, I think, is one part of it, and the other thing is what I just said. If you're blowing something up on a huge screen, let's say you have a big room, you buy a projector and you got a 150-inch screen on your wall. Yeah, if you have a 720p, it's going to look terrible. If you have a 1080, it's going to look better. If you have a 4K, it's going to look even better. But you shrink that down to a 70-inch, and the difference between the 1080 and the 4K is not going to be it's going to be pretty much unnoticeable, I would think, other than just the slight improvements to the 4K Blu-ray versus the standard. So anyway, that's a little talk about resolution, and I'm gonna get out of here, go watch some Rocket League, competitive Rocket League, the spring major, the final one before the summer. They break it up into like the seasons, and then the summer split will start in a month or so, and then they'll have a bunch of majors, and they're actually gonna have one big like main tournament too, I think. So anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in. Sorry for all the techno babble and stuff, but let me know what you think. If you have a next gen system, do you feel you're owed upgrades, free upgrades? Are you happy with just backwards compatibility? And if you have an upgrade, do you feel like it's asking for too much to expect a little more? Like, I love what they're doing with the PlayStation exclusives, but I'd love it even more if they'd bump up the visuals and not just the frame rate, and give me more things. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. Most people showed up late, but go back and rewatch. I did a tier list for the free upgrades, how I feel they rank, and gave some examples of games and stuff. And yeah, so I got another video that I have done. I don't know, I might upload it tomorrow, where I'm reacting to my favorite movie trailers of like the last 20 years. There's eight that came to mind, and I rewatched them for the first time. Some of them in like 15 years. This is the first time I rewatched them in forever, and I kind of give my reaction, and then I rank my top 3 out of those 8. And it's a cool video. I spent a lot of time making up a. You'll see when you upload it. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you next time.